This video is on percent error, what it means and how to calculate it. So percent error is a percentage of how far off like an experimental answer is from an accepted or an actual answer. Kind of like the accepted is kind of like the right answer. So first we need to understand what error is. Error is the experimental answer so this would be something you or someone else might measure or calculate from experiments or measurements in the lab. And you're going to subtract the accepted value from it. So this would be like from a lab, some sort of experiment or measurement. The accepted value would be something that you would either look up, right? You look up like the density of something or the boiling point of something, or something like I might tell you, or maybe we find an average for our accepted value. All right, so first you're just going to take your experimental answer minus the accepted value. That's the error. So percent error then is the error, right? So what you calculate up here divided by the accepted value. So maybe we could put it all together though in one thing. So our percent error is your experimental, and I'm going to abbreviate, minus the accepted value, all divided by the accepted value. But because it's a percent, you're going to get a fraction there. You got to multiply by 100. So here's the equation with everything in it. So this is kind of what you want to go back to. So I would circle or underline that. Now with your percent error, sometimes you will get in science, you'll get a negative percent error and sometimes you'll get a positive. If you've done this in math, lots of times you would put absolute value around it because you're just looking at how far off either direction. But the negative and positive actually gives us more information. So it's not wrong to be negative. We just need to know what that means. So first, if you have a positive percent error, that means that your experimental answer is greater than the accepted answer. Or maybe we should write accepted value because it's not really an answer. That just means your value right here that you're finding is bigger than this one, right? If you take a bigger number minus a smaller number, you get positive. This means you're higher than the accepted value numerically. So if your answer being greater or higher gives you a positive, a negative percent error or error means that the experimental answer is lower than the accepted value. So it just means you are below that, okay? It's not worse, it's not bad, it's just telling us how far off we were in which direction. So let's do an example. All right, so a student measured the boiling point of water to be 97.5 degrees Celsius. What's the student's percent error? So we've got a number here, we need to figure out what this number is. So it looks like the student measured it. So this is telling us this was done in the lab. So in the lab, this is the experimental answer. So I'm going to underline this and I'm going to write experimental. All right, in order to find percent error, we have to have our experimental value, but then we also have to have our accepted value. So what are we talking about here? Well, we're talking about water, okay? And water boiling always is at the same temperature. And this would be something you could look up. Okay, so water boiling in degrees Celsius is always going to be 100. So this is our accepted value. So let's calculate our percent error now. So percent error is our experimental minus the accepted divided by the accepted times 100. So I'm going to put everything in now. So this will be 97.5 degrees Celsius minus 100 degrees Celsius, and we could give it more sig digs if we want because it has more, divided by 100 degrees Celsius. So we're going to subtract first in the numerator to get that value. Okay, divide it by 100 and then times it by 100. So really that's canceling that out. And we get negative, because we're lower, right? That's not bad, it's just lower, 2.5%. Okay. All right, and we'll kind of just round to the tens or the hundredths place for percent error. Okay, we won't have to worry about sig digs. So one last thing to note is, what is the best percent error? Like, what does that mean? Well, negative 2.5% is your error. That means you have very little error. The best percent error would be 0%. Is that always possible? No, there's all sorts of errors and things that could happen that we'll discuss more as we do more labs. All right, so the best is 0. The worst is, I mean, you could even have more than 100% error depending on how far off you are. So the lower your percent error, the better you collected your data and the closer you were here to the accepted value. But like I said, that's not always possible to have a 0% error.